When my mother casually uninvited me from Christmas dinner to please my entitled brother, she forgot one crucial detail. I'd been paying their $7,000 mortgage for 2 years. Time for them to feel the cold reality of winter. I was sprawled across my threadbare recliner, absently flipping through a dog-eared fishing magazine, when my mother's call pierced the quiet November afternoon. The soft hum of my space heater provided a comforting background noise in my modest apartment as I reached for my phone, expecting her usual weekend check-in about some minor household crisis or neighborhood gossip. "Hey, Mom," I answered, pressing the speaker button while examining a particularly interesting lure on page 37. "Alex," she began, her voice carrying that familiar clipped tone she used when delivering news she'd already rationalized to herself. "Just wanted to let you know you're not coming to Christmas dinner this year." The magazine slipped from my fingers, pages fluttering across my lap as her words registered. Not a question, not a discussion, a statement, delivered with the casual indifference of someone canceling a dental cleaning. What?" I managed, my voice suddenly rough, like sandpaper against metal. She sighed, that distinctive sigh I'd heard throughout my childhood, the one that communicated her exhaustion with having to explain something she considered perfectly reasonable. "It's better this way. Keeps Mark content," she continued, as if this clarified everything. "He's been under a lot of pressure lately, and we don't want any tension." I swung my legs off the recliner, boots hitting the scuffed hardwood with a hollow thud, my eyes fixed on the coffee table where bills were stacked in neat piles, including the mortgage statement for my parents' house that I'd just paid 2 days ago. "Keeps Mark content," I repeated, the words settling in my chest like concrete. "You're telling me I'm being excluded from our family Christmas because Mark is feeling sensitive?" Her tone remained steady, clinical almost. "Don't blow this out of proportion, Alex. It's just 1 day. You'll manage fine on your own." A sharp heat crawled up my spine, my fingers gripping the edge of the coffee table. "1 day," I echoed, my voice hardening. "And the $7,000 I've been spending to keep a roof over your heads all year? That means nothing too, does it?" Silence stretched between us, the phone line crackling faintly, before she finally muttered, "Let's not make this about that. You offered to help?" I let out a harsh laugh that bounced off the walls of my apartment. "Offered? I've been covering your mortgage for 2 years, $7,000 just this year, because you and Dad couldn't handle the payments after Mark's disaster drained your retirement fund. But sure, I begged to do it." She made a small noise of irritation. "We appreciate it, Alex, but this isn't about money. It's about family. Mark needs this right now. He's in a fragile state." I walked to the window, watching the first flakes of winter snow drift against the glass, faint under the glow of streetlights as evening settled in. "Fragile," I murmured, letting the word hang cold and heavy like the frost outside. "Mark needs this. Mark always needs, and I'm always the one paying the price." I took a deep breath. "Not this time, Mom. Enjoy your drama-free dinner." I jabbed at the screen, ending the call, then tossed my phone onto the couch, its display as dark as my mood. Mark had always been the golden child. High school quarterback, Dad's fishing buddy, Mom's pride at church socials. Even when his dreams collapsed 2 years ago, he had burned through their retirement savings. $30,000 gone in a failed restaurant venture he swore would change everything. It didn't. The restaurant closed within 6 months. Unpaid vendors filed lawsuits. And Mom cried into her coffee while Dad just shrugged and said, "He'll bounce back." I hadn't argued. I had just stepped up, taken over their mortgage payments because the bank was threatening foreclosure, and they couldn't afford the monthly payment without liquidating what little they had left. $600 a month, $7,000 a year, wired straight from my construction supervisor paychecks, while Mark posted pictures of ski trips and new golf clubs he hadn't earned. I had let it slide because family was family. Until now. Until Mom told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner, the one holiday we all showed up for, no matter what. I reached for my laptop on the cluttered bookshelf, sinking back into the recliner as its worn frame groaned beneath me, and logged into the mortgage account I had set up for them. My name was on it. I had been the one calling the bank, scheduling payments, handling the paperwork because Dad couldn't navigate the online system, and Mom had simply smiled and said, "You're just so good with these things, Alex." There it stood, $7,000 drained away this year, each dollar carved from my overtime hours, my aching back, my pre-dawn shifts spent laboring in winter construction sites. I pressed cancel automatic payments, my touch as unwavering as the thickening snowfall outside, a silent guarantee of the financial storm ahead. They'd figure it out, call the bank, scramble to fix it, but not before the first missed payment triggered the default notices. A confirmation appeared on the screen. Automatic payments discontinued effective December 1st, 3 weeks before Christmas. I snapped the laptop shut, a grim smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Let's see just how fragile Mark feels when the foreclosure notices start arriving. The following weeks crawled by, snow accumulating higher outside my apartment windows. The biting cold seeped through the thin walls, but I kept moving, grinding through construction shifts, hauling materials across frozen job sites, my gloves stiff with ice as the wind howled through unfinished framing. No calls yet from my parents, just the steady rhythm of my own uninterrupted life. One evening I met up with my old college roommate, Trevor, at our regular dive bar. The place hummed with the chatter of exhausted workers and the clink of beer bottles against worn tabletops. He slid into the booth across from me, a basket of wings between us, his grin wide as he grabbed a handful. "You're quiet tonight," he said, wiping sauce from his beard. "Something eating at you?" I took a long pull from my beer, the bottle cool and slick in my grasp, and let the words spill out. Mom's call, Mark's excuses, my sudden exclusion. "They uninvited me from Christmas," I said, leaning back as the vinyl booth creaked beneath me. "After I covered their mortgage, $7,000 this year, 2 years straight." His eyes widened. A wing paused midway to his mouth, sauce dripping onto the tabletop. "Are you serious? And they just assumed you'd keep paying?" I nodded, grabbing a celery stick from the basket. "Yep, not anymore. I shut it off. They'll feel it soon." He laughed, a loud burst that earned a sharp look from the bartender. "That's cold, Alex. Literally. Love it." I smirked, knocking my bottle against his, the glass ringing clear in the bar's warm buzz. They chose Mark. I chose me. The cozy heat of the bar wrapped around me, a stark contrast to the storm I had set in motion miles away. Something solid and unshakable settled in my chest, a weight I hadn't realized I needed. Mark had always been the center of our family universe. Everything revolved around his needs, his dreams, his failures. I remembered the Christmas when I was 16, how I'd saved for months to buy a decent fishing rod for Dad, only to have the entire day hijacked by Mark's announcement that he'd made varsity quarterback. My gift was barely acknowledged, set aside while Mom fussed over Mark's jersey number. Then there was my college graduation, when they showed up 3 hours late because Mark had a minor fender bender on the way, not even an injury, just a scraped bumper. I'd stood alone in my cap and gown while other families took photos and celebrated. They arrived just as I was turning in my robe, full of apologies, but with Mark's car troubles dominating the conversation through our rushed dinner. 2 years ago, when Mark's restaurant failed spectacularly, I watched my parents drain their retirement accounts to cover his debts. "He took a chance," Dad had said, signing the withdrawal papers. "That's more than most people do." The unspoken comparison hung in the air. Unlike me, the steady, reliable son who'd never reached for the stars. I'd been the one to notice the mortgage payment notices piling up, the ones Mom hastily stuffed into drawers when I visited. I'd been the one to sit them down, work out the numbers, and set up the automatic payments from my account. "Just until you get back on your feet," I'd said. Dad had clapped my shoulder, his eyes watery. "Always the responsible one, Alex." Not a compliment, an observation, tinged with something like disappointment that I wasn't more like Mark, brilliant, volatile Mark who took risks, even if they ended in spectacular failure. December 1st arrived, the payment cancellation date, and I pictured the mortgage system flagging their account, the first notice being automatically generated. Christmas was still weeks away, but the snow had come early, thick and relentless, covering everything in an icy blanket. I kept moving. Work, A stop at the hardware store for a snow shovel and a bag of salt, the cashier nodding toward the frost-covered streets outside. "Big storm on the way," he remarked, dropping my items into a bag. I smirked, imagining the financial storm brewing at my parents' house. "Seems that way." That night I swung by the grocery store, picking up a few steaks and a six-pack, the cashier making small talk while she scanned my items. "This winter's going to be a rough one," she said, gesturing to the swirling snow outside. I grinned, picturing my parents' house, unpaid mortgage, late notices, the slow realization that the financial safety net had vanished. The first message came midweek, just as I was changing the oil in my truck, grease smudging my forearms. A text from Mom. "Alex, did you forget the mortgage payment? Bank called about a missed payment. Getting worried?" I ignored it, wiping my hands on a shop rag. My heart beat steady. An hour later, Dad's call came through, his voice gruff in my voicemail. "Son, there's some issue with the mortgage payment. Look into it when you get a chance." I didn't. Mark's message landed last, sharp and entitled. "Fix the mortgage thing. Mom's freaking out. Do your job." I smirked, tossing the used oil filter into the trash. The warmth of my garage a quiet contrast to their growing panic. The days passed, the storm intensified, and their messages came slowly at first, then like a flood. By mid-December, Mom's texts were frantic. "Alex, we got a late notice. There's a penalty fee. Please call the bank." Dad's calls stacked up, 5, then 8. His voicemails growing increasingly agitated. "This isn't funny, Alex. The bank's talking about missed payments." Mark's messages were laced with rage. "You're being a child. Fix this now." I was at work, securing a tarp over exposed framing, the winter air slicing through my coat, when I played Mom's latest voicemail. "Alex, we got a certified letter from the bank. They're talking about default procedures. What's happening?" I smirked, tying down the last corner, the bitter cold a perfect reflection of what they were about to endure. Christmas was just 10 days away, and the weather report predicted an intense cold front. Flawless timing. The weekend prior, I stood in my small kitchen grilling a steak, condensation clouding the windows as the meat sizzled softly on the cast iron. My phone vibrated incessantly. 8 missed calls from my mother, 5 from my father, and a relentless flood of messages illuminating the screen. "Mom, Alex, we have a meeting with the bank tomorrow. Please call us." Dad, "Turn the payments back on this instant." Mark, "You're wrecking everything. Mom can't sleep." I flipped the steak, the savory aroma thick in the air, imagining their home. Mom pacing the living room, Dad studying bank statements with growing dread, Mark sulking in his expensive winter coat. All of them facing the consequences of years of prioritizing one son over the other. Not unbearable yet, but the real pain was still coming. I plated my steak, the warmth soaking into my fingers, and took a seat at my small table, letting their desperate messages pile up untouched while I savored my meal in the quiet of my own space. The third week of December arrived with a vengeance, bringing record-low temperatures and snow that piled in drifts against my apartment building. I had spent the weekend weatherproofing my windows with plastic sheeting and draft stoppers, the bitter cold a constant reminder of what my family must be facing. Monday morning, I trudged through 8 inches of fresh powder to reach my truck. The job site would be miserable today. Outdoor framing in this weather was brutal, but I had worked through worse. As I scraped ice from my windshield, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Another text from Mom. "Second notice came today. Please call us, Alex. We don't understand what's happening." I pocketed the phone without responding, my breath clouding in front of me as I climbed into the truck cab. The engine protested briefly before turning over, heat slowly seeping from the vents. I had a good day ahead, overtime pay for braving the elements, then dinner with Sarah, a woman I'd met at the hardware store last week. Life continued, undisturbed by the storm I'd unleashed elsewhere. By Wednesday, the temperature had plummeted further. News reports warned of dangerous conditions, especially for homes with inadequate heating. I thought of my parents' aging furnace, how Dad had mentioned last winter that it needed replacing. "Next year," he'd said, "once we're back on our feet." That night, as I microwaved leftover lasagna, My cousin Jamie called. We weren't particularly close, but she lived near my parents and occasionally checked in on them. "Hey, what's going on with Aunt Linda and Uncle Rob?" she asked, without preamble. "I stopped by yesterday, and the house was freezing. They had space heaters running in every room." I leaned against my counter, watching steam rise from my dinner. "No idea. Haven't talked to them in weeks." "That's weird," she continued, concern evident in her voice. "They mentioned something about bank troubles, and Mark was there, looking like someone had run over his dog. Everyone seemed really stressed." I replied noncommittally, stirring my food with a fork. "Family drama, probably." "Well, whatever it is, they're in rough shape. Uncle Rob asked if I could loan them money for the heating bill. I've never heard him ask anyone for money before." A small smile played at the corner of my lips. "Did you help them out?" "I gave them what I could, but I'm not exactly rolling in cash," she sighed. "Just thought you should know. They seemed desperate." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, savoring both my meal and the knowledge that reality was finally setting in at my parents' house. The foreclosure process wouldn't happen overnight. Banks moved slowly, especially during the holidays, but the pressure was mounting. The missed payments, the late fees, the looming threat of losing their home in the dead of winter. It was all unfolding exactly as I had anticipated. Thursday brought another blast of Arctic air and a voicemail from Dad that I played while defrosting chicken for dinner. "Alex," his voice sounded strained, older somehow. "The furnace gave out last night. Repairman says it's shot. We're using space heaters, but the electric bill—" He paused, clearing his throat. "Son, whatever this is about, we need to talk. The mortgage, the heat, we can't manage without your help. Please call us back." I deleted the message and continued preparing my meal, humming along to the radio. Outside, snow continued to fall in thick, silent sheets. Friday evening, I met Trevor at our usual bar. The place was packed with people escaping the cold, a cheerful buzz of conversation rising above the jukebox's Christmas playlist. I was halfway through describing my date with Sarah when my phone lit up with Mark's name. I declined the call, but seconds later, a text appeared. "You think this is funny? Mom's wearing her coat indoors. Dad's talking about selling his tools to make the mortgage payment, all because you're throwing a tantrum about Christmas dinner? Grow up." Trevor noticed my expression and raised an eyebrow. "Family drama?" I showed him the message, and he let out a low whistle. "Man, they really don't get it, do they? Still making it about the dinner invitation, not the 2 years you've been carrying them." "Exactly," I said, pocketing my phone as it vibrated with another incoming call. "They've never seen me as anything but the reliable backup plan, the one who fixes everything while Mark gets all the attention." "So what happens now?" Trevor asked, signaling the bartender for another round. I shrugged, a weight lifting from my shoulders as I spoke the truth aloud. "They figure it out themselves. They're adults. They made their choice when they decided Mark's comfort was more important than my presence. And if they can't figure it out?" The question hung between us as our fresh beers arrived, foam spilling over the rims. Outside, the storm intensified, wind howling against the windows. I took a long sip, savoring the bitter taste. "Not my problem anymore," I replied, clinking my glass against his. "I've been their safety net for too long. Time they learned to fall without me catching them." 4 days before Christmas, the storm that had been threatening all week finally unleashed its full fury. The meteorologists called it a bomb cyclone, a dramatic pressure drop that transformed our usual winter weather into something apocalyptic. Winds howled at 60 miles per hour, visibility dropped to near zero, and the temperature plummeted to 15 below zero before factoring in wind chill. I'd stocked up on essentials the previous day, my freezer and pantry packed with enough food to last through the holiday weekend. The construction site had shut down until after Christmas, too dangerous to work in these conditions, giving me an unexpected paid vacation. I spent the morning in sweatpants, nursing coffee while watching the storm rage outside my living room window, oddly satisfied by the parallel between the weather and the situation I'd engineered with my family. My phone had been quieter the past 2 days. Perhaps they'd finally gotten the message that I wasn't coming to their rescue this time. The last text from Mom had simply read, "We're disappointed in you, Alex." No mention of the mortgage, the heating, or Christmas dinner. Just disappointment, their default emotion when it came to me. Around noon, as I was assembling a sandwich, the power flickered once, twice, then stabilized. The radio warned of widespread outages across the county. I checked my emergency supplies, flashlights, batteries, the camping stove I kept for fishing trips, and felt secure in my preparation. Unlike my parents, I'd planned ahead. The knock came at 2:17 p.m. At first, I thought it was just debris hitting my door, thrown by the violent wind. But then it came again. 3 sharp raps, unmistakably human. I wasn't expecting anyone. In this weather, delivery services had suspended operations, and no sane person would be out visiting. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. Mark stood there, snow crusted on his expensive parka, his face red from the cold, his expression a mixture of anger and desperation I'd never seen before. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home, but curiosity won out. I unlatched the deadbolt and opened the door, the wind immediately forcing its way inside, bringing a swirl of snow and bitter cold. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, stepping aside as he pushed past me into the warmth of my apartment. He stomped snow from his boots, his breathing heavy. "You wouldn't answer your phone," he said, unwrapping his scarf with trembling fingers. "Someone had to come." "In this?" I gestured toward the window where the storm continued its assault. "You could have killed yourself driving in this weather." "I didn't have a choice." He removed his gloves, revealing raw, chapped hands. "The furnace is completely dead. The house is down to 40 degrees inside. Mom and Dad are huddled in the living room with space heaters, but the power keeps going out." I crossed my arms, unmoved. "And this concerns me. How?" His eyes narrowed, a familiar flash of the entitlement that had defined our relationship since childhood. "Don't play dumb, Alex. We know you canceled the mortgage payments. The bank called Dad yesterday. They're starting foreclosure proceedings after the holidays. 3 missed payments, and they're already threatening to take the house." "Sounds like a problem for you and them to solve," I replied, walking to the kitchen to resume making my sandwich. "Want one? I've got turkey and Swiss." He followed me, incredulous. "Are you serious right now? Our parents might lose their home in the middle of the worst winter storm in decades, and you're offering me a sandwich?" I sliced through the bread with precise strokes. "They're not helpless, Mark. They're adults who made choices. They chose to drain their retirement for your failed restaurant. They chose to prioritize your comfort over my presence at Christmas. And now they're facing the consequences of those choices." "This is about the Christmas dinner?" He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "You're punishing our parents because Mom didn't want drama at the table? Grow up." I set down the knife, turning to face him fully. "No, this is about 2 years of carrying a family that never appreciated it. 2 years of paying a mortgage that should have been covered by the retirement fund you burned through. 2 years of being the reliable son who gets pushed aside whenever golden boy Mark needs coddling." His face flushed deeper, not just from the cold now. "That's not fair. I tried with the restaurant." "You failed," I cut in, "spectacularly, and instead of facing the consequences, you let Mom and Dad sacrifice their security. Then you had the audacity to suggest I shouldn't be at Christmas dinner because my presence makes you uncomfortable." He looked away, running a hand through his snow-damp hair. "I never said that. Mom made that call on her own." "But you didn't correct her, did you?" I placed turkey on the bread, methodically assembling my lunch while he stood there, dripping melted snow onto my kitchen floor. "You were perfectly happy to have Christmas without me, even while I was paying the bills that kept the lights on." A heavy silence fell between us, broken only by the howl of the wind outside and the soft sound of lettuce crunching as I pressed it into the sandwich. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice quieter than before. "I didn't know you were paying the mortgage." I paused, knife hovering over the completed sandwich. "What?" "I didn't know," he repeated, meeting my eyes. "Mom and Dad never told me. They said they'd worked something out with the bank, a payment plan or something. I had no idea you were covering it." I studied his face, searching for the lie, but found only genuine shock. "You expect me to believe that? $7,000 this year alone, and you never wondered where it was coming from? He shook his head slowly. They don't tell me about their finances. After the restaurant, well, I stopped asking. It was easier to pretend everything was fine. I cut the sandwich in half, the knife hitting the cutting board with a sharp thud. Convenient. It's the truth, he insisted, his shoulders sagging. Look, I'm not here to argue about who knew what. I'm here because our parents are freezing in a house that's about to be taken away from them. Whatever issues you have with me, with all of us, they don't deserve this. I pushed a plate with half the sandwich toward him, a peace offering of sorts. Eat something. You look like hell. He accepted it gratefully, taking a large bite. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the storm providing a dramatic soundtrack to our standoff. The heating system will cost about $4,000 to replace, he said finally. I've got maybe half of that saved. I was going to use it for a down payment on a condo, but... He trailed off, staring at his half-eaten sandwich. And the mortgage? I asked, already knowing the answer. They're 3 months behind now. With late fees, it's close to $2,000. The bank wants it all before they'll stop the foreclosure process. I leaned against the counter, studying my brother, really looking at him for perhaps the first time in years. His designer coat couldn't hide the exhaustion in his posture, the worry lines that hadn't been there last time we'd seen each other. Golden boy Mark, finally facing reality. So, you came to ask for money, I stated flatly. He nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, but not just that. I came to ask you to come home for Christmas. I laughed, the sound sharp in the quiet kitchen. Now you want me there? When you need my checkbook? No, he said, meeting my gaze steadily. Because I was wrong. We all were. And because they're our parents, and they need both of us right now. The wind rattled my windows, a particularly violent gust that made the glass shudder in its frame. Somewhere in the distance, a transformer exploded, a brief flash of blue visible through the swirling snow. The roads are impassable, I said after a long moment. Even if I wanted to help, we couldn't get back to them today. Mark set down his plate, determination hardening his features. Then we leave first thing tomorrow. Together. I stared at him, this brother I'd resented for so long, and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first crack in a wall I'd built years ago. I'll think about it, I said finally. You can take the couch tonight. Morning arrived with eerie silence. The howling winds had finally ceased, leaving behind a transformed landscape. Pristine white drifts sculpted into waves, cars buried to their windows, tree branches sagging under the weight of snow and ice. The storm had moved on, but its aftermath remained, a frozen wasteland bathed in brilliant sunshine that did nothing to warm the sub-zero air. I found Mark already awake, standing at my living room window with a mug of coffee clutched between his hands, staring out at the snow-covered parking lot. Roads are still unplowed, he said without turning around, but the highway department website says they're working on the main routes. Should be passable by noon. I grunted in acknowledgement, making my way to the coffee pot. I'd slept poorly, my mind churning with conflicting emotions, lingering resentment warring with a growing concern I couldn't quite suppress. The image of my parents huddled around space heaters in a freezing house had infiltrated my dreams. I've been thinking, Mark said, finally turning to face me, about what you said yesterday, about carrying the family for 2 years. I poured coffee into my mug, not responding. I want you to know I'm going to pay you back, he continued. Every cent you've put toward their mortgage. It might take me time, but I'll do it. I raised an eyebrow. With what money? Last I heard, you were barely making rent on your apartment. He set his mug down on the coffee table. I got a job last month. Nothing glamorous. Assistant manager at Riverton Grill. But it's steady, and there's room to move up. A regular job? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Not another entrepreneurial opportunity? He smiled slightly, acknowledging the dig. Yeah, a regular job with a regular paycheck. After the restaurant failed, well, I had to face some hard truths about myself. I studied him over the rim of my mug, noting the absence of the designer watch he'd always worn, the haircut that was growing out rather than freshly trimmed, small signs of someone learning to live within their means. We should pack some supplies, I said finally. If the power's still out at Mom and Dad's, they'll need food, batteries, maybe some extra blankets. Mark's shoulders relaxed slightly, recognizing this as the closest thing to agreement he was going to get from me. I saw a hardware store on the corner that looks open. We could check for portable heaters, too. And by 11, we'd loaded my truck with emergency supplies, non-perishable food, bottled water, flashlights, batteries, and a small propane heater I'd found in my storage closet from my camping days. The roads were partially cleared, though massive snowbanks lined either side where plows had pushed through. We set out in silence, the truck's tires crunching over packed snow, the heater blasting against the bitter cold that seeped through every crack. The 20-mile drive to our parents' house would normally take 30 minutes, but today I estimated at least double that. "You know," Mark said after we'd been driving for about 10 minutes, "I used to be jealous of you." I shot him a skeptical glance. "Right." "I'm serious," he insisted. "You always knew exactly what you wanted. Construction, right from high school. No wavering, no second-guessing. You built a life while I was still trying to figure out what mine should look like." Both. I kept my eyes on the road, navigating around an abandoned car half buried in a snowdrift. That's not how I remember it. You were the one with all the attention, all the praise, star quarterback, prom king, Mom and Dad's pride and joy. He was quiet for a moment, watching the snowy landscape pass by. "They bragged about you too, you know, just differently. Alex is so responsible. Alex knows what he's doing with his life. Why can't you be more like your brother?" I snorted. "When was this? I must have missed it." "Behind closed doors," he said softly. "When I'd screwed up again, or changed majors for the third time, or needed money to cover rent because I'd spent it all on some girl or some stupid investment scheme. They'd bail me out, then tell me I should be more like you." We approached an intersection where a snowplow was working, forcing us to stop and wait. In the distance, power company trucks were visible, workers in bright yellow jackets attempting to restore electricity to dark neighborhoods. "That doesn't change the fact that they uninvited me from Christmas," I said finally, "or that they took your side every time it mattered." Mark stared out the passenger window. "I know, and I'm sorry about Christmas. When Mom suggested you not come because of our issues, I should have said something. It was easier not to. I've been taking the easy way out my whole life." The plow cleared a path, and I eased the truck forward, tires slipping slightly before finding purchase on the salted road. "Did you really not know I was paying their mortgage?" I asked, the question that had nagged at me through the night. He shook his head. "I swear, Alex, they never told me. I knew things were tight after they helped with my restaurant debts, but..." He trailed off, then added quietly, "I guess I didn't want to know how bad it really was. Another easy way out." We drove in silence for several miles, the only sound the rumble of the engine and the occasional scrape of the wipers clearing condensation from the windshield. The countryside was eerily beautiful, trees encased in ice that sparkled in the sunlight, fields of untouched snow stretching to the horizon, the occasional farmhouse with smoke rising from its chimney. "Remember that Christmas when we were kids?" Mark said suddenly. "The one where Dad lost his job right before the holidays?" I nodded, the memory surfacing easily. "We were, what, 10 and 12? Yeah, Mom told us there wouldn't be many presents that year. I threw a fit, but you just asked if we could still get a tree." I smiled, despite myself. "And then you disappeared for 2 days after school, and Mom was freaking out, calling all your friends." Mark laughed. "I was working at Mr. Geller's store, stocking shelves after school, made enough to buy Mom that perfume she wanted and Dad a new wallet. They were so proud of you," I remembered, the familiar twinge of jealousy rising even after all these years. "They were," he agreed. "But you know what I remember most about that Christmas? The presents you gave them. That birdhouse you built for Mom in shop class. The wooden toolbox for Dad with his name carved on the side." I frowned, surprised he remembered. "What about them?" "They kept those things forever. Mom still has that birdhouse hanging in the backyard. Dad's toolbox is still in the garage. He uses it for his special tools, the expensive ones." Mark turned to look at me. "My store-bought gifts were forgotten by New Year's, but they treasured what you made. They always did." We turned onto the county road that led to our childhood home. the way now familiar despite the altered landscape. Power lines sagged dangerously under the weight of ice, and several large trees had fallen, their root systems unable to hold against the storm's fury. "I'm not saying they didn't make mistakes," Mark continued. "They did, especially with how they handled things between us. But they love you, Alex. Maybe they didn't show it the right way, but they do." As we rounded the final curve, our parents' two-story farmhouse came into view. No smoke rose from the chimney, no light shone in the windows. The place looked abandoned, frozen in time under a blanket of snow. "Looks like the power's still out," I observed, pulling into the driveway and cutting the engine. Mark nodded, suddenly looking anxious. "What are you going to do? About the mortgage, I mean." I stared at the house where I'd grown up, memories flooding back. Summer barbecues on the back deck, Dad teaching me to throw a baseball in the side yard. Mom's flower gardens that lined the front walkway, now buried under snow. For all its flaws, this place had shaped me. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "Let's just get them through this storm first." We gathered supplies from the truck bed, arms loaded with bags and boxes as we trudged through knee-deep snow toward the front door. Before Mark could knock, the door swung open, revealing our mother wrapped in multiple layers of sweaters, her face pale with cold, but lighting up at the sight of us. "Mark, you made it back," her words cut off as she registered my presence beside him. "Alex, you came too?" The surprise in her voice stung, but I forced a smile. "Brought some supplies, and a heater." She stepped back, allowing us inside. The house was frigid, my breath visible in the air. In the living room, Dad sat bundled in blankets beside a small space heater, looking older and more vulnerable than I remembered. He stood shakily when he saw me, confusion and hope warring on his face. "Son, I didn't expect, after everything." I set down my boxes, suddenly uncertain what to say. The anger that had fueled me for weeks seemed to dim in the face of their obvious distress. Mark broke the awkward silence, his voice unnaturally bright. "Look who I found. And he brought a better heater, food, everything we need until the power's back." Mom stepped forward hesitantly, her hands twisting together. "Alex, about Christmas, we should have—" "Let's get this heater set up first," I interrupted, not ready for that conversation yet. "You're both freezing. We can talk after everyone's warm." Dad nodded, relief evident in his eyes. "Good to have you home, son." I didn't correct him. This wasn't home anymore, and I wasn't staying. But as I knelt to unpack the propane heater, Mark catching my eye with a grateful nod, I acknowledged that something had shifted. The storm outside had passed, but the one inside was just beginning to clear.